One of my videos is going viral and I'm getting a lot of DMs asking me about creative finance, specifically that there isn't enough information out there. And I submit this to you. There is enough information, you're just not doing anything with it. So I'm actually writing a guide where you can get all of the creative finance goodness, including my scripts, where I go to look, what searches I use, but that takes time. So I'm gonna make this guide just to run through a few quickie but goodies, to do an overview of what creative finance is and maybe answer some questions. Why am I in my kitchen, you ask? Well, because this sunflower picture is really cool. Not really. We just moved into this house. We did not buy it with creative finance. And I am still setting up my office. It's not quite ready for the grand reveal, but follow along and you will soon see because it is going to be lit. But the kitchen is my second favorite room in the house because that's where my wife stores all of my yummy food. What is creative finance, this hip new fad that all the kids are talking about? Well, it's actually not new at all, and it's a blast from the past. It was widely used in the 80s because interest rates were up to 12. I remember stories that my mom used to tell me all the way up to like 18%. What the sellers back then would do is called owner carries if they owned it outright, or subject twos, or subject to, which is paying the underlying mortgage on behalf of the seller. Now, all of this is completely legal. In fact, in the state that I live, Idaho, IREC, the Idaho Real Estate Commission, has a legal document, the RE17, and all the realtors have access to it, and it has to do with nothing but creative finance. This is completely legal, but there is the due on sale clause, which I will get to later in this video, and that's what everyone is biting their nails about. Okay, so we're gonna be going over seller carries, subject twos, and hybrids between the two. So an owner carry is simply the owner of the property owns the property outright. This is called fee simple, not free simple, but fee simple, common mistake. The owner or Mr. or Mrs. Seller owns it outright, and you want to buy that property, but instead of going to the bank, getting a loan for that, you buy it from them. You don't have the cash to buy it outright, so what you do is you make payments to them instead of to the bank, essentially giving them their equity over time. So the way that this could look is, let's say the interest rates are 6%, because that's about what they are right now. You could go to Mr. and Mrs. Seller and say, hey, I will give you the fair market price for this house, but I will also add in 4% interest. So you're making more money, I'm saving more money, and we cut out the bank. Okay, that one's pretty easy. It's just giving the sellers their equity over an extended period of time rather than paying it off right up front. But Matt, who owns the property? I am glad that you asked. The buyer would own the property, but the seller would hold the note on the property. And I'm going to be going through definitions at the end of this video. So if you don't know what's going on, you can either take a note and wait till the end. I'm going to define all things, or you can skip ahead, look through the definitions, and come back. But make sure you come back because there's still a lot of juice left to squeeze. Subject to, this one is my favorite because in 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22, people were getting stellar interest rates. And now we are not. But those mortgages can be sold with the property, which is the way that I like to explain it, paying the underlying mortgage and taking over their interest rate. This is different than an assumable loan. And again, I'll explain what assumable loan is at the end of the video. What a scenario here would look like is Mr. and Mrs. Seller has a 3% interest rate and they've had their mortgage for, let's say that they've had it for a year or 2 years. There's not quite enough equity in it for them to sell it, pay the realtor fees, pay whatever fixes there has to be, pay closing costs, and still make any money on it. So they'd either break even or they'd actually have to pay money at closing to sell their property. This is a very common situation. What we can do is buy the property at a premium price because that property is worth more with that interest rate. So after closing, what happens is long-term escrow company takes over the distribution of the monies. So let's say that the underlying mortgage is $2,000 a month, and the buyer agrees to give the seller $500 a month for the next 2 years, and then there'll be a balloon payment, and he pays the whole thing off. Again, don't get too wrapped up on that. Let's just stick with the monthly. So what Mr. Buyer is going to do is give the $2,500 to the long-term escrow company. It'll actually be like $2,525 because long-term escrow is somewhere between $10 and $25 a month to service the loans, which is totally worth it because you get a history. You get a statement every month saying, hey, you paid it. Good job. Mr. Buyer gives the check, $2,500 and 25 or whatever the service fee is, to the title company. And the title company will then distribute it $500 to the seller and then the $2,000 to the underlying mortgage, and they will pay on behalf of the seller. So the lending company, there's no hiccup there. They just keep receiving their monies and everything goes on the way that it was supposed to for the next 28 years or however long the loan is being serviced. How do we write one of those contracts up? Well, what I do is I just use whatever the state legal purchase and sale agreement is. Every single state has one that I know of, all 50 of them that I know of. There's a legal state document that is a purchase and sale. And then I just use I'd use an addendum, which can be a Word document that's labeled addendum 1. And in the agreement, in the purchase and sale agreement, you have to make sure to say, see addendum 1, with all the terms just listed out there. And the thing with that is what I've come to find is in the creative deals, the seller and the buyer are actually working together instead of opposing each other. So everybody wants the deal to go through once you get to the agreement of like, this is what we all want. And the reason for that is because there is so much extra leverage in the deal because the bank that you would typically go through to buy a property, they're gone. They're not even there. So you have a lot more monies to give to both sides to make it an even better deal so you're not like pushing and prodding for $100 here, $100 there, inspection here, inspection there. Do not use a Google form. Like, do not go on Google and say, what does a creative finance form? And just use anybody Joe Schmo's form, because that can get you in trouble. And should have put this at the front of the video, but I am not a real estate lawyer. In fact, I'm not a lawyer at all. In fact, I'm not even in law school. So this is not legal advice. This is just what I have done, and I have not been sued yet. Let's talk about how to find these deals. Talk to people. That's it. I like to use the MLS. I think that talking to agents is nauseating, but once you get them on your side, you have a funnel where they will keep bringing you deals and they will keep talking to the owners about creative finance, which I think it's a lot of juice for the squeeze up front, or it's not a lot of juice for the squeeze up front, but pays dividends in the future. Not a lot of people have access to that because we're not all realtors. So what you can do, and what I do for markets that are not my own, is use Zillow or Realtor.com or one of those services, whichever one you're more familiar with, and look for properties that have been on there for over 40 days. Look for vacant properties. Hey, how do we know if it's vacant? Well, first of all, sometimes they say they're vacant. Or you can look for photos that don't have any furniture in them or look staged. Those are two telltale signs that it is vacant. Why we look for vacant properties? Because it usually means that there's some kind of pain. If it's been on the market for over 40 days and it's a vacant property, that means the seller is paying the mortgage on that property, or at least paying taxes on that property, and they're not using it. So they're just waiting for it to sell. Next thing to look for is the property in distress? Usually when somebody sells a property, they try to church it up as much as possible. They fix everything. They make it look nice. They make it look pretty. They make the yard look good. They do all the small things that they know somebody's going to want or expect. If those small things aren't done, then there's probably some kind of pain in the property. And I'm talking about pain a lot because that's going into the negotiations piece of it. Not because we want people to be in pain, because we have a solution that can solve their problem, that the market maybe can't solve the problem. Other things to look for that cause a lot of pain is houses that were just purchased. You know, in 18, 19, 20, 21, if a house was just purchased there might not be enough equity, like I was saying before, to sell a property and pay commissions, aka realtor fees, pay closing costs, pay repairs, and still have the sellers walking away with something. Because what happened was interest rates went up and house prices went down, not as drastic as people thought. There wasn't the great crash yet. Could happen. I severely doubt it because the market analytics do not support that at all. And not one person has presented a reasonable amount of evidence that there is going to be a crash. Also, on that note, BlackRock and Vanguard, who are the two largest hedge funds in the world, are buying single family homes. I doubt they would be doing that, and I doubt these onesie twosies gurus who say there's going to be the crash, or the people who are too scared to jump into real estate and want to feel good about themselves say there's going to be a crash. I doubt that they're smarter than the largest hedge funds in the world. But this gives you a great opportunity to buy right now because prices went up and the cost of these houses went way up, meaning interest rates, and then inflation made all money cheap, all money worth less, not worthless. So this is a great time to get into a house for a 2 to 3% interest rate and give the seller their equity over time. What this looks like is the hybrid that we've all been waiting for. So what this looks like is you go to Mr. and Mrs. Seller and you say, or you go through their real estate agent. And that's going to be a whole nother script that will be in my guide. And that's going to be valuable because real estate agents are a nuisance. I am one, guilty as charged. That's why I'm speaking from experience. Hybrid deals is essentially just saying, yo, I am going to cover your mortgage so you don't have to pay for it anymore. And then I'm also going to give you a monthly payment that goes straight to your checkbook. Or I'm going to give you a fat down payment now and take over your mortgage for you. Or I'm going to take over your mortgage so you don't have to pay it. Then in 5 years, 7 years, 12 years, 15 years, 20 years, I'm going to give you a balloon payment of X amount and pay you the interest that we decided on from today. So your investment still makes sense, but instead of paying you right now because I can't afford it and you're not going to get it from anyone else, I'll pay it to you in the future so you can send your kids to college back. Really with creative finance it is just that. It is how creative your brain works and how you can come to a solution that fits everybody's needs. And this is why I don't necessarily like scripts and I don't really use a script. Though I've cold called enough people and I've had enough of these conversations that I can go off script. There's a few common phrases that I work into every situation and I always use in specific situations. But other than that, it is very nuanced of finding what the pain is, solving a problem, and getting the agent or the seller to understand that solution well enough to either make a decision or take it to the decision maker. For negotiations, if you haven't mastered that yet, or if you have mastered that yet, or if you haven't read it in the last 3 months, I highly recommend you stop this video and just go away. Just order it right now. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. He's a hostage negotiator that turned into business coach / business guru and wrote a book that's very entertaining and very informative about how to communicate. You will use it the rest of your life and in daily conversations. I read it at least twice a year. You're scouring Zillow, you're starting to see patterns of what you want to call on. Now, how does the conversation actually go? You are doing your absolute best to get rejected. Get rejected 100,000 times and you will get one deal. I know it sucks. That is just the way it is. Nobody except for me gets their first creative finance deal on their first call. And the only reason why I say that is because it was literally, that's just how it happened for me. But I don't believe in luck. That was extraordinary and I would not be able to replicate it in 100 lives. You call a bunch, you talk to a bunch of people, and you actually do try to get the no. That's one of the points in Chris's book. You fight for the no. Get no 3 times before you can get a yes. And the way that this looks is just how you phrase your questions. Hey, is now a bad time to talk? No? Oh, great. And then you go on. Because what happens is confused minds say no. People want to say no. So you give them that opportunity as much as possible before you're ready for that yes. And if you give them no enough times, then they will feel empowered to say yes. Little brain hack. And if it's an agent, you give them a call and you're like, this property looks great. How the heck is it still on the market? Why hasn't it sold yet? And here's tip number 2. You shut up, dork. People love to talk and people love giving away their secrets. You just have to let them. I get it. Silence can be uncomfortable. Let them be uncomfortable. Just hold out one more second and I promise you they will fill that silence. Or they'll hang up on you and you'll just get to call somebody else. The person listening is the person with all of the power in the conversation. Right now, you on the other side of this phone, you have all of the power. You can follow, you can hit like, you can send this off to your friend. I can't do any of that jazz. By the way, this is a small YouTube channel and I'm hoping that I give you good value and bring it in an entertaining package so you can consume it. If this provides you value, hitting the like, subscribe, sending it off to a friend, that helps other people get exposed to this kind of information. Enough with the shameless plugs. If you're fortunate enough to actually be talking to the seller, same thing. Why hasn't it sold yet? And then you just listen. And what you're listening for are those pain points. You know, I have to move by this date, or, oh, the price is too high. People are telling me the price is too high, or interest rates. I love it when people bring up interest rates because the thing is every property will sell in any market if it's priced accordingly. And what happens is this is kind of a real estate insider, these real estate agents are really hungry right now because in our market, it was really, really easy to be an agent and make six figures. And then it got really, really hard because all of a sudden interest rates went up and people stopped selling. So people stopped being able to buy. And now agents are like, how do I get business? How do I feed my kitties or whatever? So what they do is whatever the seller wants them to do, which is always wrong. The sellers, I'm sorry, you are always wrong. Your house is never worth as much as you think it is. And you need to do the dang fixes. Also pay for the professional photos. I never make my clients pay for their photos. I just do it and let it come out of my commission because it's a negligible amount. But it's a common gripe. Why interest rates are my favorite reason is because that's something that neither one of you can control, but you can both gripe at. So the enemy of my enemy is my ally. You can come together, hate on the interest rates, and then find a way to take that out of the equation, i.e. cutting out the bank, i.e. creative finance. See where I'm going with this? You can do this too. You just need practice talking to people. Just like I need practice talking to the camera. Don't even think I've been looking at the actual camera this whole time, just my fat head. Now you're in conversation. Here's the deal. You're not gonna get a yes the first time out the gate. If you do, that's great. We'll just skip ahead to what we're talking about, contracts and whatnot. It's gonna take some follow-up. Usually it's like 1,000 to 14,000 follow-ups. And you don't wanna overdo it. But once a week, once every other week, just to call, nurture your leads, talk to them. I have a buddy, he's very successful, and he has a whole team of people who do this. It's his nurture team. And he has a cold calling team, and it's quite the establishment. But you're just one person. Or maybe you're a team of people. You figure out, identify where your strengths are, and then fill in the niches. Someone can be the cold caller, someone can be the nurturer, somebody can be the negotiator and the underwriter and the structure, the deal structure, and then somebody can be the marketer, go on social media and talk about your success. You can have as many people as you want because there's enough of the pie to go around. Automate all of this junk. Get a CMA, put all your clients' information in, name, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, 1234 Main Street, 1-800 call me. Just put them on a drip, every so often, shoot them off an automated email. Or it'll tell you, it'll keep in track. It'll be like, hey, you haven't called this knucklehead in 2 weeks. It's time to call them. Or like, hey, shoot this person a text. It's been 3 weeks, and you can set all that to do it yourself. So it's just like a reminder. And you can do a personalized text, or you could just automatically send out a text. That's going to be super important when you're calling 10,000 people and there's that one deal hiding in there and you got to figure out which one of those people is going to give you the deal. Comment below if you guys use a CMA, which one is your favorite CMA? Because I am still actually looking for one that I like. Bada bing, bada boom. You just got someone to say yes, they're interested in creative finance. So what do you do now? This is actually my favorite part. You structure the deal, and what this starts with is you actually underwrite the deal for yourself first. And you should be doing this. You should start figuring out like when something's getting close to a yes, and you should run your numbers and know what you can do. The way I explain this is you have to understand what your destination is before you punch the address in your GPS so it can send you a route there. Underwriting a deal, what does that look like? Well, it depends on your exit strategy. There's a ton of exit strategies. There's long-term rental, mid-term rental, short-term rental. There's a flip, there's a wholesale, There's improvement, forced appreciation, and long-term hold, and then go back to the long-term, short-term, midterm. Rezoning, there's development, parceling. There's a bunch of different ways that you can go, figuring out what your niche is and sticking with it. I just did a video about, I'll put it up somewhere up here. I don't know where it ends up, but I'm new to YouTube. About all of the exit strategies I did in 2023, and I helped out with a whole bunch more. Sticking to what you know is the smart way to go, unless you have partners that have done a different deal before. That's another exit strategy, is getting a partner. Guys, I highly recommend that what you do for your first few deals is freaking sell them immediately. Sell them until you have enough of a nest egg to make some bad decisions, because real estate is freaking expensive. I just took a $9,000 hit in January of 2024, which was 2 weeks ago from filming this. And the only reason why I survived, I had that nest egg for each property. So you figured out what your exit strategy is and your second and tertiary exit strategy, because you never want to buy a property if you only have the one exit strategy. That's a bad deal. So let's say your first exit strategy is you're actually going to wholesale this, which wholesaling, again, we're going to save all this to the end. It's essentially you get something under contract, and before you actually close on it in your name, you sell it off to somebody else. You sell the deal to somebody else. You get whatever the delta is between what you bought it and what you sold it for, but no liability, which is why I tell everybody to start off with as little liability as possible. Let's say it is a gold slam dunk home run deal and you really do want to hold it. I still suggest your first, if it's that good of a deal, then you could wholesale it for a whole bunch of money. Your secondary is going to be, let's say, getting a capital partner and short-term renting it out. I should do a freaking video on just that exit strategy. You have to take management into effect, because managing an Airbnb is atrocious. And you have to take furnishing into effect. I bought 2 Airbnbs at the beginning of this year. I knew it was going to be a lot to furnish, but they ended up being close to $80,000 for the 2 of them. Now, it was a 5-bedroom and a 6-bedroom, and they're both high upscale properties, so there was higher furnishings, and I had a professional interior designer do it. So those costs are pretty high. My point is they can be high. And your third one, let's say you can't find the capital partner, so you can't afford to furnish it, or you'll go and you'll move into it, you'll do renovations, and you'll house hack, rent out the other rooms while you're living in it. So you got your 3 exit strategies. Now you know how much it's going to cost per month to operate, which is going to give you your monthly, how much you have for overhead to offer the seller. You're going to know what your upfront cost is to furnish or whatnot. You're going to know if you have a capital partner or not, how much you can offer for a down payment, or if you can even offer for a down payment. The way that I project cost is I am very conservative for the premium price, the price of the property, plus if I'm going to give the seller an interest rate, I like to bake it in the purchase price for 2 reasons. I don't actually bake it in for if the IRS is watching. I actually bake it in and then I go back and do the math and apply it as an interest rate. And the reason why I do that is because you can't bake it in. The feds will end up applying the interest rate because you have to pay interest to a property, but it's just easier to do the math if you have the number. And the reason why I want to do that is because I take the appreciation. A healthy market appreciation is 2 to 3% per year. In Boise, it's been crazy. So we've gotten 6%, and there was a couple of years where it was like close to 100%. Of course, those prices have settled down a little bit, but it's still, the appreciation here is wild. That being said, I still use the conservative 2% metric for appreciation, so I know what the property is going to be reasonably worth. You can also take principal paydown. If you know how long the underlying mortgage is there, or if there isn't an underlying mortgage, if I'm going to pay the seller an interest rate, I just do a flat rate. I don't amortize it. Just because math is not my forte, but I have to do a lot of math for what I do. So who knows why I chose this life? But you know what the principal pay down is going to do. I don't even include that. I just do the appreciation. And so let's say it's the balloon payments at 10 years. Balloon payment just means like at the 10-year mark, the balloon pops and you have to pay the whole amount back. So what I do is I look at the property of what I'm buying it for today, and I can reasonably calculate it's going to appreciate by 2% each year. So let's say it's a $100,000 property. 2% of that is $2,000. After 10 years, that's $20,000. So I can reasonably say it will be worth $120,000. Okay, now refinancing your rental property at a balloon payment. Let's say your balloon payment's at 10 years, and you're going to need 75% loan to value, LTV, and that just means that you have 25% equity in your property to refinance it. Let's say the property you're buying is valued at $100,000 when you buy it, and your balloon payments at 10 years. Within reason, you can say over that next 10 years, the value of the property will appreciate about 2% per year, and that's a conservative number, over the 10 years. 2% times 10 is 20%, and 20% of 100,000 is 20,000. So your property 10 years later, within reason, will be worth $120,000. That wouldn't be enough at the $100,000 to pay it off because you only have 20% loan to value. But here's the kicker. There's principal pay down. Now, I like to try to run my numbers as conservatively as possible. So I only like to use half of the principal pay down, just to be really conservative. You should know at this point what the underlying mortgage is, what the percentage is, and you can calculate what the amortization of that is. When I negotiate a rate with the sellers, I use a fixed rate. And the reason why I do that is just simple maths. So let's take that same $100,000 property, let's say over the course of 10 years. So on a $100,000 mortgage, let's say $300 a month is going towards the principal pay down every month. Now 300 times 12 is $3,600 a year that's coming off the principal. At 10 years, we can say that's $36,000 off your principal. So that means the LTV of that without appreciation is at 64,000, and with the appreciation at 120, that's about 50% LTV. And you could easily, even if you cut that principal pay down by half, you can easily refinance that property in 10 years using only the property to do that, meaning the rental income off your tax returns as proof of income and using the LTV of that property. So you can pay the balloon payment off and you can refinance it with a bank, and rental income generally beats inflation, actually. Inflation, a healthy inflation is 2 to 3%, and rental income is generally somewhere between 6 and 7%. So your rental income should be more, and this is also power of real estate, it's a get rich slow scheme, should be more at year 10, meaning year 8 and 9 should have more of a rental income than years 1 and 2. So you can use those 2 prior tax returns to qualify for a refinance. What I do for rental income is I generally put it at the 5%. For Airbnbs, I just do it at inflation. So you got your numbers, and you got to play around with your numbers, and you got to do it conservatively because you don't want to get in a situation where you can't pay off a loan or you have to sell a property to pay off multiple others. Also, you can run with the balloon payment. So you just pay off the seller, you do a cash out refi. If there's enough equity in it, you might be able to just do a HELOC, which you can do a HELOC on a rental property. The loan to LTV, the LTV values just are much lower than a primary residence. You can also gain capital partners at that point, and you should have proof of concept because the property has been ripping for the last 10 years to bring an investor on and have a capital partner. So plenty of ways to pay it off, but understanding your most likely and second most likely exit strategy is very important for that. So now you're coming to terms. You're talking about terms, and the way you're negotiating these terms with the seller. And the way that I like to do this is there's 3 parts of a negotiation. There's your premium price, there's your down payment, and then there's terms. You get 1 for sure. You might get 2, but you never get 3. And the reason for this is just because you got to make it a good deal. I like to tell sellers that the most important thing to me is my money up front. If I can come in with 0% down and they cover their realtor fees and their closing costs, then I will give them a whole lot more money on the back end because I can use the appreciation and I can use the principal pay down that somebody else pays for. That doesn't have to come out of my pocket. When we start talking about a down payment and I have to come out of pocket, or I have to go get a partner and sell this deal on them, then there's just not enough room for me. And my terms either have to be really good, meaning I have to have a long holding period or a very cheap monthly payment, or some other perks like you're going to build a swimming pool for me, or you're going to renovate the downstairs for me, or I get my commission out of it, something like that, for it to make sense for me to come with the down payment. Or maybe I'm just paying them outright. This is something that we did with one of our properties. We gave the dude a high down payment, and then we said, you're just going to walk away and we're just paying the underlying mortgage now. We have a renter in and it's cash flow. The seller got to walk away with a chunk of cash, and we got a 3% interest rate on a multi-unit. There are hundreds and thousands of ways for me to structure deals, and it all depends on what the pain is, honestly, and what the exit strategy and what you can do. Figuring out what you can do, though, gives you a stopping block to just tell the seller, hey, sorry, I'm not your buyer. Which negotiation tactic That is huge. Pulling back. Sometimes it's okay to tell them, I might not be your buyer. Oftentimes that gets them kind of to snap back to reality and gets them to be a little bit more reasonable. The deal is structured. You figured it out. Now, how does the actual closing process look? You go to your state's purchase and sale, you use that agreement with the amendments that you both agreed on, and you take that to your title company and you ask them, hey, how do you feel about this? Do you have a long-term escrow and does this look clean to you? And they will tell you if one, they have a long-term escrow or not. If they don't, go to another title officer. If they've never seen creative finance before, go away, go to another title officer. Or if it looks good, use them. We're all on the same team. And they'll get you set up with long-term escrow during the closing process. They'll all be in the know. It won't be an awkward transfer or whatnot. Closing for either subject to or owner finance honestly looks the same as closing. It's actually less paperwork and you can close way faster than going through a bank. Here's other key fact. You don't have to go through an appraisal because the bank's not lending any money on it. I would highly recommend you still go through an inspection. Highly, highly recommend pay for an inspection, but you don't need to do an appraisal. There's no point. An appraiser won't even be notified. And you can buy a property as is, actually as is. We just went through in this property that I'm in now. We bought it conventionally. I let a bunch of things slip after the inspection. I just told them not to worry about it because I knew that the appraisal would come back telling the sellers to fix it. So we went through the inspection. I got the things fixed that I needed to get fixed that had to do with like water damage and whatnot. But I also knew that the inspection wouldn't let it slide. I let the inspector be the bad guy on that. The inspection came back and they had to they'd put another $6,000 into the property. That might be something that the sellers don't need to deal with. Or if you're just gonna wholesale it and you're not gonna have to deal with it, you may not care, or you're gonna flip it anyways, you may not want them to pay a bunch of money just for you to have to redo all the work that somebody else did. Here is the scary part, the due on sale clause. It gets triggered 100 times out of 100 times, 100%. It always gets triggered. The bank very seldomly actually acts on it though. So the bank's gonna know that the deed was transferred. They will know. I want to make this as clear as possible. The bank will know. If you keep paying the bank, then they might not even care. Even if the bank sends you a nasty gram and says, yo, what the heck? I want you to pay this in full. I have a buddy who does probably thousands of these transactions a year. And then also Pace Morby. Everyone knows Pace Morby who knows creative finance. He talks about the due on sale clause and what they both say out of their situations that this has come up. It's never come up to me personally, but what they've done is they just keep paying the bank. And as long as the bank, they'll keep calling, they'll say, hey, you've got to pay this up front. You got to pay the whole amount. You got to do this. But as long as they keep cashing your check, and usually it's different departments. So the person calling you is not the person cashing the check. As long as they keep cashing the check for you, they can't foreclose on you. Cannot. No foreclosing. So just keep sending them the money, and as long as they keep cashing you out, then you're good. And they'll eventually stop calling because they'll realize that it's not working. Now, on top of that, things that I like to do is I have an insurance policy. I self-insure. I have partners that every one of my deal is good enough where I could sell it if I have to. I can bring on a partner, or I could just sell my equity stake, take what I've earned from it so far, my cash flow, and then just write it off and have them buy the bank out if they stopped cashing that check. So having these measures in place, but there is never no risk. And I want to talk about risk for a little bit. There's never no risk, even if you don't make a move. If you keep renting for the rest of your life, then you're losing 100% of your money. You have a 100% interest rate right now. You're making somebody else rich. Or if you wait to do the Dave Ramsey thing and buy a property outright, one, you're probably not going to beat inflation unless you have a crazy high paying job and you're able to save a crazy high amount of your income. But also that's really freaking slow. And if you're in that situation anyways, then I don't need to talk to you about risk, because if you're looking at creative finance, you're probably doing it to over leverage your money anyways, because you understand the power of real estate, and you're probably not even watching this video because you probably are out doing the thing. Why is it that it's only the people that don't have anything to lose that are so scared about losing everything they don't have, is my point. In 2023, I lost everything. I lost my dream career. I lost my ability to walk for a little while. I was told that I'm going to lose the ability to do everything that I love to do active. And with all that lost, I still found my nerve to go and make something of myself and to go use these skills that I was developing and to actually go use the freaking skills. So my point is, there's good risk and there's bad risk, just like debt. There's good debt and there's bad debt. Figuring out what is good and figuring out what is bad, that's going to be what makes you rich. If you're still with me, I'm gonna finally get to the definitions. And if you just skipped ahead, there's a lot in this video. We're gonna go through alphabetically definitions, and I'm gonna use my road box to try to help me out with this. So give me 1 second. Agent commission is just the commission that is paid to the real estate agent involved. Amortization. This is the whittling down the debt, paying off the debt, and the difference between what is going towards principal and what is going towards the interest. Appraisal, a professional estimate of the market value for a property. Assignment, this is the transfer of an interest of a property from one person to another person contractually. Assuming a loan, this is taking over the terms of the loan, the interest rate, and paying on behalf of the original lendee through the approval of a lender. Balloon is the large lump sum of money that comes towards the end of whatever your term with the seller is. Capital gains. This is the profit from selling real estate or an investment. Cash on cash, or COC. This is the return in cash, actual cash flow from an investment you made. Let's say it cost me $1,000 to buy this property and I get $10 back a month. Well, that comes back at $120 over the year, and that is a 12% cash on cash return. Cash to close. This is the total number it's going to take you to give to the title company to close on this transaction. Closing costs. These are all the fees associated with this closing. This could include title searches, attorney fees. The inspector I use allows you to pay at close, different liens that have to get paid off at closing, and much more. Deed of trust, a legal document that secures a trustee between a lender and a borrower. Disposition is the process of selling or transferring a property. Down payment is the total initial amount due at closing that's just going to go straight to the seller. Or if you're using a bank, straight to the bank. It's cash that you have to give to the bank or seller. Equity is the amount, the portion of value that the owner actually owns of a property. Escrow, specifically escrow company. This is a third party that is neutral to both sides. They're going to hold funds or documents until certain terms are met to ensure fair play. Exit strategy. Now, this is a pre-planned measure to sell or otherwise hold the property that's going to maximize profit and minimize risk. Fix and flip. This is a strategy where you buy a property, you hold it just long enough to fix it up, and then you sell the property for a profit if you do it right. Long-term escrow is just escrow, but spread out. They're that third party, non-biased, that's holding onto legal documents or funds for a longer than usual time. Note is a legal document that prescribes the terms in which you're going to pay back a specific amount over a specific time, typically with interest. Novation is, this one's tricky. It's replacing an old agreement and allowing you to sell a property on the open market. This is usually done when wholesaling isn't viable. Subject to, this is purchasing a property while leaving the underlying mortgage in place. Without assuming the loan, the buyer still pays that underlying mortgage through a third-party long-term escrow company. Title is the legal right of ownership to that property.